can we get a trajectory towards getting close to balance even?
I think it is going to come obviously broken long before the timescales that this would have to sort of play out on.
Okay.
Because, you look at what the government's doing, and it is a little bit of a both. Because what I think will actually happen is that they will select bits from the above. And it will always be the absolute minimum that they need to pick from the above, which is the least politically unviable to get them through the next 3 months.
The cancer of the political cycle.
Yes. And look at what the current Conservative government is actually doing. They are saying, they put up a couple of taxes, and they say we're going to put up more taxes, and they say that they're going to cut spending, but all of those big tax cuts and all of those big spending cuts are the other side of the election. And they're not going to win the next election.
No, I mean, they're done.
Yeah. So they're not actually doing anything to solve this problem. And what do you think Labour's going to do when, as soon as they take office,
spend more?
Yeah. They're not going to take all of those spending cuts that the last government lined up for them and faithfully implement them and go even further. Because even the ones that the Tories have lined up, all it does is it gets us to a slightly more balanced situation. It basically trims the deficit down over like an 8-year period or something like that, assuming all of their optimistic scenarios, all of their optimistic projections come true. So we are going to continue to bleed out. We are going to continue to find that national debt goes up. The trajectory has always been that this deficit increases. You can't, as I said, get the rate of tax to GDP much above that sort of 34, 36%. And every time you try it sort of blows up on you and comes back. So, and you've got the inflation coming through in the system as well. And that's of course, going to be the error term in all of this. So when you can't meet the obligations in any year, of course they're going to turn to money printing. So that's going to trigger more inflation, which is going to get into the situation we're in now.
More debt servicing. It's basically a death spiral. You're talking about death
we are in a death spiral. So and that's what these numbers show. We're in a death spiral. We can't get out of it. If you try and fix it with inflation, you get to the problem we've got now where you're giving, I think nurses is 6% or something like that. I think teachers have had around about 6% is of that sort of level. And it breaks stuff. So I'm a governor for a primary school. And it was financially, we were very well run. We were actually having a surplus every year. We'd built up a bit of a nest egg. But of course, most of the expenditure for the school is teacher salaries. So you put a 6% increase on that and it knocks the whole thing out because there's no corresponding increase yet from government to increase your revenues.
So what you're saying is when they offered the pay rise to the teachers, they haven't matched that with more funding for the schools. They're saying to the schools, you figure that out.
So far they have. But it's not going to work.
Okay.
Because, my example is we were a very financially well-run school. And we have been knocked into deficit, which is terminal. So there is no prospect. And if we're in that situation, I'll guarantee that 90% of schools are in that situation.
Huh.
So that line at least is going to have to go up. The NHS line, if you give those, and you say that that 2021 was an exceptional year. Once you start adding in 6% to the payroll number, which is the biggest cost they have, it's not going to look so exceptional. In fact, if anything, in a couple of years, that's going to look quite a good year.
Well, this is another the issue. Listen, I have a home budget. Okay, I'm within my budget at the moment, and there are times when I've been out of it. When I have my credit card, and I've generally run a deficit or a surplus through my whole life. I know right now, if I was suddenly in a massive amount of financial problems, I would have to make some harsh choices. I would have to maybe sell my car, or cut my holidays, or sell my house and move somewhere smaller, and all these things would suck. But you would have to do it. The country needs to do it.
So, if you were the government, how would you do it? How would you solve this problem? What would you cut?
I mean, look, I'm not going to give an intelligent answer off the cuff in a podcast. I'm a few grades above moron. So, let's be real about this. But you would have to find a way, and you would have to make it. Might be a case of it's the end of the NHS. Now, look, I'm saying this if you could have the two political parties come together and say, the country is fucked if we don't figure this out. This is something we have to do together. We have to.
But that is not
I know.
in the national conversation.
I'm in cloud cuckoo land. All I'm saying is this is what it should happen.
Oh, yeah.
And you would be able to find a way to cut 240 billion from the spend, but some of it would be harsh. It would be people going without pensions, or it would be the end of the NHS, or it would be, NHS only being available to free for people who earn under 15,000 a year and everyone else. I don't know what the answer is, but there would be an answer. Like when you have to find a way, if you were told you would have to find a way.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a solution to all of it. I mean, it is what it is basically what you just said. It is the only viable solution to save the system is to cut spending to within its means. And that means radical transformation of public services. And at this point, it would be truly radical transformations. It would be schooling to 11 only. And after that, make your own provisions. Now, actually, I think where we got to these days with online learning and YouTube and stuff, that might not be the worst thing in the world imaginable.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the other stuff, when you move up from there and you're looking at halving the effective budgets of pensions and welfare, like I said, that is effectively boarding houses. For the publican, are never going to accept that, and for the NHS, it would mean something like no NHS after 50, or something like that.
But this way, as I say, it's line by line. I can't go to one and go, it's that, and this is the it has to be line by line. What can go? But
those things I'm talking about, it would have to be all of those. Right, and then every other line as well. All of them would have to get cut by that level at this point. And that's the thing. This is the whole point of the talk, is that it is so politically completely unviable. And not only that, is that we're having this conversation now talking about it by looking at the numbers. If we were to exit this room and walk down the hall and find somebody else, they would not even acknowledge the problem. No, nobody who watches the mainstream media.
You mean they're not aware of the problem?
Yeah. So I mean, amongst your normie friends, who is talking like this about how do we find a solution to this government spending problem?
What do you think, Sean? Sean's our studio producer for the day. Be interesting to chat to Sean afterwards, though, because I think this is going to be the first time he's heard this.
Because this is nowhere in the mainstream media. Nobody is saying that we are running up against the financial buffers here.
Well, the funny thing is, this isn't I'm telling you, there's certain people in my friendship circles or my family circles would hear this and say, "This is conspiracy." It's like, no, this is reality.
Oh, it's just I've just pulled numbers from the budget. So yeah.
These numbers exist online. The government publishes these numbers. These are true. Like, you tell me an answer. Just run through this logically. Yeah. This is why I don't know. We need more independent, successful journalists in the UK pushing this shit.
But the people within this system must see this.
Okay, so shall I talk about what I would do if I was them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You mean if you had the job or you were evil?
Oh yeah, if I had the job and I was evil, yeah. Well, because you'd have to be, wouldn't you? Because thing is,
so what you think they're going to do within the constraints of their personal careers, their bullshit.
Yeah. Well, look, you don't get into a position of power without. So the way they stop from radicals from getting into these positions is there are 1,000 different filters that you need to pass through before you get anywhere near this level. So anybody who has a non-mainstream approach to this would have been filtered out a long, long time ago.
You're saying I've not got a chance?
Oh, no. Anyone who watches this podcast is not getting anywhere near, the reins of power on this. You will be filtered out, a long time before. So so what is a solution that is within the mainstream realm of thinking? I know what that is. You need to plan for significant civil unrest coming forward. And we know that they're talking about this because you can go on to the World Economic Forum YouTube page and you can watch their talks. They have spent years talking about significant civil unrest coming down the track.
Well, we have a small amount of civil unrest at the moment. I think the level of strikes we're seeing is a form of civil unrest. It's a protest to begin with.
And I don't think that is entirely accidental. One thing I certainly don't think is entirely accidental is people gluing themselves to roads and Van Goghs and so on, because what that's doing is it's gaining public support for a new public order bill.
Hold on. Therefore you're implying the people like Extinction Rebellion are really government stooges doing this.
Have you ever looked at their webpage? It is full of quotes from government scientists. The only difference
Hold
between...
on, are you saying they're stooges or they're inspiring stupidity?
I'm saying that the government and them are singing from the same hymn sheet.
Okay, fine.
The only difference between the Conservative government and Just Stop Oil is a timing one. The Conservative government want to achieve net zero by 2050. They want to do it by, I think, 2030.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like full conspiracy is these are paid actors.
Oh no, I'm not saying I'm not saying they're paid actors.
Like I get it. Like we talked about it at the very start. I believed what the government said with regards to the lockdown at the very start. I was gullible.
Because they created a narrative.
They created a narrative, and I believed it. But I also spoke. I wasn't just a moron. I did speak to a doctor, and he talked about the situation that was happening in the hospital. And I've spoken to him since, and his views changed. But sometimes I wonder how much of this is insidious decision making, and how much of it is maybe just the natural, organic way these things happen because of the incentive models.
Yeah, I think they become, to a certain extent, one and the same because, as I mentioned, these, in order to be in a top position in a Western government at the moment, you need to sort of ascribe to the whole set of views that become self-reinforcing, and so therefore they reinforce those views, they promote those views because they hold them, and you don't get into this club unless if you have a completely different set of views. So, for example, my style of doing economics is more Austrian school. There are no Austrian economists at the Bank of England or the Treasury, because if you ascribe to my way of thinking about economics, the solution to these problems becomes you need to scale down the size of government. The mainstream economists, they do not factor in money and debt into their calculation. So the Fed has never acknowledged the debt. They don't think in those terms. They effectively exclude it from their model, which sounds really weird, but they actually do. They just don't think in those terms. And therefore, an increase in money and debt is not a problem to them because they just don't factor it into their thinking. So, that's one example of it, but it goes well beyond that. It goes through all of the narratives that, I don't think there is going to be any change on approach from a whole bunch of this stuff from the people that we've got in there at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think they're structurally capable of it.
Okay. Carry on your train of thought.
Yeah. Right. So, what would I do if I was in there and I was running it? And you said evil, but I don't think that these people are actually evil. I don't think that's their motivation.
No, the incentive system creates evil output.
Yes, but I think they think they're doing the right thing because they cannot imagine anything outside of this system. So they think that the most important thing is to maintain this system. And it's very easy to make a good humanitarian case for that because this system provides the NHS, it provides national defence, it provides welfare, it provides pensions. So it is very easy to think that this system must maintain at all costs because otherwise what's going to happen to those poor people?
Mm-hmm.
So what are they going to do to maintain this system at all costs? And as I talked about, they are planning for significant civil unrest coming down the track. So what tools do you need to respond to that? I would note that in 2018, the Davos event was themed around digital IDs. And at the end of it, they produced a working paper that they gave out to governments to say, this is what you need to go and implement at home. And if you want to, whatever country you live in, you can go and search for something along the lines of rollout of digital IDs, and you will find shortly after that 2018 Davos paper, by a lag of 1 or 2 years, there's always in whatever country you're in, we've got it here in the UK, their plan on how to roll out digital IDs, and you can look at the two documents, and there's a very clear sort of causal link between one and the other.
We've had Tony Blair pushing it, haven't we?
Yeah, well, he's been pushing digital ID, IDs for many, many years, but now he's switched on to digital IDs. So digital IDs gives them a way to keep tabs on dissidents and people who push back against this. The other thing, of course, is going to be central bank digital currencies. You put those two things together and you can control you don't even need policemen at that point. If you step out of line, if you're involved in the wrong people, if you're involved in the wrong networks, your ability to spend money outside of the 5 miles around your house disappears. You're not going to protests anymore. a million and one ways that they can shut you down because
Overnight, it'll be untenable.
yes,
We're talking about a slow decline, like a slow way of slipping into this. It's like what happened in Canada. I have had a guy emailing me about this week, telling me about the protesters and how many problems these caused in Ottawa. And I've been trying to argue back that it was still a peaceful protest. And civil disobedience can still be peaceful. And he said, how can it be? And I was like, well, for example, ironically, this example I used, but if you sit on a road and block traffic, that is arguably a peaceful protest because you're not being violent, but it is also civil disobedience. But we've seen what happened. We literally saw in Canada, a developed nation, people cut out the financial system for protesting.
And retrospectively, in many cases,
Yeah. And so we've seen a domino fall there. Yeah. And that's I can't understate how big an issue that is.
Oh, that is terrifying. Yeah, the government there's now an established precedent in the Western system that if you go up against the government, your bank account can be taken away from you. You can't buy food. You can't pay your mortgage. I think more of that will come. So how would I roll this out? What would I do? Well, as soon as the technology, because we know they're working on central bank digital currencies. They've said it. The Bank of England and the Treasury, they've got the job adverts up. They're hiring people who have the technical skills to build this. They've published papers on how they're going to do it. They've talked about it. In fact, one of my first big threads was on central bank digital currencies, and that was back in the day, just 2 years ago, when they were still denying vigorously that they're going to do it. Now they've now dropped that, and they've said, yeah, we are actually working on these. So
and we know Rishi Sunak is a big fan of them.
Yeah. He's done his videos on them, hasn't he?
Bitcoin.
Yes.
Twat.
So how are they going to do it? Well, I think what they're going to do is as soon as they've got something ready to go, they're going to co-opt businesses into it. And you've got a business which is presumably UK based, so they're going to come to you at some point and they're going to say, well, businesses from now on have to pay their taxes through this digital CBDC wallet.
I think there's a step before there.
What's the step before that?
Visa and MasterCard. And I know that because one of those companies reached out to sponsor the podcast. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
And one of the things they talked about is CBDCs on their cards. So I think you co-opt the financial system.
Well, that would be a necessary step if you wanted to get the businesses on board.
Yeah.
So, I think these businesses first, maybe they line up all the ducks in terms of the Visa and MasterCard as well. And that's really important for them because then you've got a collection of not individuals but businesses, and they iron out the kinks of the process. They see it working. It's a smaller number of people who have better support for when things go wrong. You can speak to somebody sensible on the other side, not somebody who's desperately confused or whatever else, but you can speak to the accountant on the other side and you can iron things out. So you can get the process fairly sophisticated. And then I think after a couple of years, they roll it out to individuals. And at that point, it's just optional. And people like us are going to be pushing back at that point, saying, watch out. And everyone's going to say, well, it's optional. You don't have to sign up. What are you worried about?
It works great.
Yeah, get that tinfoil hat off your head. Yeah. Just don't worry about it. It's purely optional. It's only for businesses and people who want to have it.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want a pint? Ping.
Yeah. Right. And then I think basically they hold fire and they wait for a crisis. They won't have to wait long because there is always a crisis coming along. Preferably you want an international one. Right, and at that point, it's going to be, we need to help people. We need to do a subsidy. We need to do a stimmy like the US did a few years ago. And when the US did their stimmy, of course, they just sent out checks to people. But there was delays and there was problems, and it probably cost a lot to administer the system. And those flaws will get amplified massively in a few years' time when this happens. And they'll be saying, look, the only way that we can do this, we've looked at it, the only way that we can make this work is by a rollout of the CBDC wallet to everybody. And we have to do this because it's a crisis. Don't know what the crisis is, maybe a meteor hits, whatever. But we need to get these out to everybody. Right, and that's the point where you're going to start jumping up and down and saying, guys, this is a trap. Don't do it. And the media narrative is going to be so strong that, I had people calling me granny killer all the time when I was pushing back against lockdowns. You're going to get that times 10 when this comes through because people are going to be saying, Pete, don't you understand? People are struggling. People can't pay their bills. People can't heat their homes. They can't feed themselves. And you're trying to stop them from getting a stimulus check. You're going to have it turned on you that all your friends and family at the moment, the ones who basically ignore you or sometimes call you a conspiracy theorist, they're going to be turning on you, and it's going to be very unpleasant, because you're going to be, in their minds, standing between them and a stimulus check of whatever's been promised, like 4 or 5 grand or whatever it is. Okay. And the whole media narrative is not going to even acknowledge what you're saying. The whole media narrative is going to be, how can we enroll the vulnerable onto this? We've got little old Mrs. Miggins over there, and she's not too au fait with smartphones and digital wallets and stuff. How can we make sure that everybody is included on this system? It is going to be like the lockdowns times 10 when this comes. And then, of course, once we've got that and everybody's got this CBDC wallet, it's not going to solve the problem, because this system, as we've talked about this whole presentation, it is all breaking. It is all falling apart. The inflation effect is going to ensure that you cannot afford to get through the day. So you're going to have to turn it into a UBI system before long. It's going to have to become, at some point, £200 a month to help you with the cost of livings. It won't matter that some of us can remember back in 2000 when even somebody with no particular skills, somebody who just did manual labour, could live a perfectly good life and could even get a mortgage, go to the pub, probably have a holiday once a year. That won't matter. We will have got to the point where, in order to just get through typical living expenses, you're going to need this £200 a month payment.